Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to Song 10 of Season 10 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Before we cut over to social media, I wanted to take a second to commemorate the life of Blake Harrison, who sadly passed away shortly afternoon this past Friday after a ferocious battle with MDS, a genetic blood cancer. Blake is famous within the Petty community for his superb Tom Petty mural on the 34th Street wall in Tom's hometown, Gainesville. And even during his illness, he was committed to maintaining that mural, as well as another commemorating the victims of the 1990 Gainesville student murders. Every word I've ever seen written about Blake tells the story of a warm, genuine human being who dedicated his life to art and to people. My condolences go out to his family and friends, and I look forward to visiting the mural this October while I'm in Gainesville and being able to enjoy the legacy that he left behind. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Blake Harrison. Over on Facebook, there was some good chatter about the last song we talked about, Hard on Me. Bob Reedy noted that it's a great song despite the sad circumstances and backstory. Making music was probably therapeutic for him at that difficult time in his life. And I think that the Wildflowers album was one part therapy and two parts avoidance, actually. When you look at the sheer volume of top shelf material that came out of those sessions, this was a man giving everything he had emotionally and physically to his music. Executive producer Paul Roberts commented, "Great pod, Kev. As always, a top dissection of the melancholic tune Hard on Me. Even better was possibly your best interview yet. Nick raised some excellent points, and the divorce from Stan and his relationship with his dad was something I'd never considered in the context of Wildflowers. How many episodes till you get him back to talk about Echo?" Well, thanks as always, Paul, for your support, enthusiastic support, I'll say, and your comments. I'm so happy that you enjoyed my conversation with Nick, and I am really looking forward to his thoughts on Echo. And we're not all that far away from it now, incredibly. If my math is correct, I should be hitting Echo around the start of next year. So I would guess that I'll be bugging Nick to come back on the show sometime in February or March of 2025. Now, that's a project 2025 I can get fully behind. Nora Hayward-Olsen said, "Such a heartbreakingly beautiful song." I did that on purpose, forgive me. "Many of us can relate to a time in our lives when we felt like we needed to keep everything together for the sake of our kids or our families when certain situations were falling apart. I can only imagine how success, wealth, and other trappings of fame can intensify this. Bravo to your guest for his insights as a psychologist without speculation, but sticking to the facts that Tom revealed about himself. And I would love a discussion on why Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are underrated. I have some theories on that." Well, thank you very much, Nora, for the lovely comments about Nick's contribution to the episode. On your question of why the Heartbreakers are so underrated, I think that would be an excellent conversation, maybe with a music historian. And I also have some ideas around why they never hit that very top level of at least commercial success. But I also don't think that was ever Tom's goal, which is probably one of the main reasons. Long-time listener, and hey, that's enormously appreciated, Mike B., commented, "Maybe it's a recency bias, but does anyone else prefer and or feel that the alternative version of Hard on Me just hits on an even deeper level? I will always love the original, but that alternate version truly took my breath away like very few songs ever have. Hauntingly beautiful and so raw. I can't imagine how hard it must have been not to use it or any of the songs meant for the double Wildflowers album. I love all the alternates, but Hard on Me has to be my favorite. Love the podcast, day one listener. Keep up the great work, a true gift for Petty fans." And hey, like I said, man, thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate the fact that you listen. Possibly it sounds like every week, so that's super, super cool. And that will be a really fun conversation to have once we get to Wildflowers and all the rest, which is going to be a massive season of the show in itself, probably even longer than the Wildflowers series, to be honest. I would say that I think the version included on the album, for me at least, it's the best fit with the rest of the album. But then I'm sure we'd say that if the alternate version had been the one that was used, we'd probably think the same thing. You know, these songs become just a part of the fabric of our lives, so it's sometimes hard to be really, really objective about which one we prefer over another, as we haven't really had both for the same length of time in this case, or in the same context. So maybe I'll figure out a way of doing some fan engagement during that season, and we'll incorporate some of that into the episodes, perhaps. There's some more love for Nick's contribution to the episode over on Twitter, with the marvelous Steve Ursel writing, "This was a brilliant episode. I hadn't really tuned in closely enough to the weight behind this song, but the discussion with your guest, Nicholas, really made me appreciate the song in more depth." And hey, Steve, thanks so much for listening as always. And again, I'm really happy that plenty of people have been giving Nick lots of love, because He's an excellent thinker, very articulate. He's a wonderful guy and someone I get on with very, very well, and hopefully get to meet and shake hands with sometime. Anyway, that's all the social media wrapped up. So thanks to everyone who took time to leave me a comment. It's always very much appreciated, and I enjoy reading them out. So this week, we're lifting the melancholic tint of the last couple of songs we've listened to by heading into much lighter, frothier waters with Cabin Down Below. In the liner notes for Wildflowers and all the rest, producer Rick Rubin says of Cabin Down Below that it's the Heartbreakers in their dance club band mode. Tom sings it like a guy who is in on the joke. The band swings like crazy because that's just what they do. And for me, this song's always felt like an old 60s style rock and roll song for sure. That swing, that groove, that general easy breezy vibe just smacks of all those great rock and rollers that the Heartbreakers adored. It also has the added similarity to those old-time rockers in that this song clips along briskly, getting in and out in under 3 minutes. Remember when an album was like 10 songs and would be about a half an hour listening experience? Now I'm getting nostalgic for mono mixes and big choruses. Cabin Down Below was played 16 times in 1997 during the Fillmore residency and was a regular mid-set mood lifter during the Dogs with Wings tour in 1995. Despite the popularity of the song among Pettyheads, it's one I suspect wouldn't be as well known outside the fandom. But for anyone who wasn't a deep fan and sat down and watched the documentary Somewhere You Feel Free, this song acts as the de facto theme tune. The song opens with Tom and Mike playing that simple, stripped-back riff on electric guitars panned hard left and hard right. The tone in the left channel, which I'll assume is Mike's, has more reverb on it and more sustain in the notes, where the tone in the right channel is just straight up, dry, greasy blues rock. Once the drums kick in, we then get Ben Montench adding that suspended piano rhythm phrase and Mike adding in some little licks to round out the sound. But as with everything on this album, there's a gigantic amount of space in this song to let everything drip and simmer with that underlying bluesy stank. A word that will be coming up in my conversation with my guest this episode, you can be very sure. Once we get that chord change from the E to B, the notes are left to ring a little longer and the star of the show becomes that big fat juicy bass line from Howie Epstein. It's a somewhat unusually flamboyant bass part from a guy who usually likes to sit deep in the pocket and let the other parts of the band provide the fireworks. But here, those big slide notes he plays are just sumptuous. The other thing to note here is the fantastic flat snare sound that Steve Ferrone uses on this song. You can really hear those loose chains on the bottom of the snare, especially in the fill that leads into the first verse, or first chorus. We'll get there. It's quite different from the alternate take from Finding Wildflowers, which, in terms of snare drum, is tonally closer to You Don't Know How It Feels. But in this take, it's got that slightly more trebly sound to it, and I think that it works really, really well to counteract the bass guitar and the baritone range that those guitar parts are in that riff. Through that first chorus, or verse, or section, look, I'll definitely talk about this right away. Anyway, in this first section, you can really hear the trade-off between Tom and Mike on guitar because those little filler licks pop up on both the left and right channels, and I'm willing to bet that the guitars and drums for this song were recorded live, or as close to live as possible with very few overdubs or punch-ins. Like You Wreck Me, this has a very natural, organic feel to it, and you can easily picture Mike and Tom sitting across from each other in that studio, in those, on those sort of boardroom chairs, just kind of watching each other and waiting to have the lead handed off. It's a wonderfully synchronized twin sneak attack choreographed spontaneously between friends who know exactly what the other is thinking at any given musical moment. After the first 8 bars, the song stays in the same place for 8 more. Then we get a chord change and the transitions into that, to me, massively Beatlesy, Well, I Got My Eye on You section where Steve Ferrone double times the hi-hats. But let's pause there and talk about the shape of this song. Structurally, you could posit a few different ideas about this song already. You could suggest that it has no chorus or no distinct chorus section. It has 2 separate distinct parts of the music, but they feel more like a verse section and a bridge section to me because the lyrics in the I Got My Eye on You section definitely doesn't feel like a chorus, and I don't think that they are. Yet the chorus, if the song begins with it, which the lyrics would support, is the exact same pattern, tempo, volume, and intensity as the verse section, if that's what the second 8 bars are. So I find this short, punchy little song interesting right out the gate because I really don't know what to call each section. If the first 8 bars are the chorus, is I Got My Eye on You then a pre-chorus rather than a bridge? It's not usual, though not completely uncommon, of course, to start with the chorus anyway, but I'd love to hear from all of you on how you think this one shakes out compositionally. And don't get me wrong, this potential lack of a clearly delineated verse-chorus structure doesn't bother me one jot. And actually, I'm not sure I'd ever even considered it until I put pen to paper for today's episode. But for the sake of being able to reference them efficiently, I'm going to call the first 8 bars section 1, the second 8 bars section 2, and then the third, that sort of Beatlesy section 3. And that should avoid confusion, other than when they don't follow sequentially, as they don't. In fact, you know what? Let's just use A, B, and C. There. In this case, the song structure, if you look at only where the lyrical content is A, B, C, A, C, B, A, which I've just noticed is palindromic, which makes this even cooler. Confused yet? Never mind, stick with me. Right, the C section, the Beatlesy middle bit. Good Lord, there's some fantastic, fun, upbeat noodling going on in this section. Lots of berry bends and honky-tonk piano, all resting over a silky smooth backbeat and driving bass line. Heading back into the A section, listen out for an absolutely delightful little rolled, it's almost like a Roomba-esque piano trill from Benmont right after the line, "Come on, go with me, girl." And it just makes the whole song feel jolly and light. After this next A section, we then get a loose, jammy, bluesy 16-bar solo section with Mike, I always assume, taking the primary lead, but I'm fairly certain Tom's throwing in the odd line there too. The first half of the solo section is that pretty straight up Chuck Berry bluesy stank, but then we get a really cool, it's almost like a surf rock style 2-bar run that begins the second half of the solo, which is lifted, sort of stylistically from Dick Dale's Miserloo. It's that fast chugging on the open E string before stepping back up to the melodic bends, and I have to tell you, that part always makes my face happy. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from the Hard On Me episode was this. Vagabonds, Virgins and Misfits, Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs' new album was produced by which ex-Heartbreakers producer? Was it A, Jeff Lynne, B, Ryan Ulyatt, C, Jimmy Iovine, or D, George Drakoulias? Well, Jeff Lynne, of course, produced Full Moon Fever and Into the Great Wide Open back-to-back, which blew the second half of Tom's career wide open. He then returned 15 years later to co-produce Tom's third and final solo album, Highway Companion. Ryan Ulyatt also came into the Pettyverse for that last solo album as recording and mixing engineer, and Ryan also co-produced the last two Heartbreakers albums, Mojo and Hypnotic Eye, as well as both Mudcrutch albums, and he oversaw all the live and compilation projects from that point on. Jimmy Iovine very famously made a name for himself as a producer on Damn the Torpedoes, Hard Promises, and Long After Dark, while George Drakoulias' involvement with Tom and the band began informally during the recording of Wildflowers, and would see Rick Rubin's protege take the co-production reins on The Last DJ. But your question for this week is this. George Drakoulias had his first producing credit on the debut album of which Southern rockers? Is it A, The Black Crowes, B, Blackberry Smoke, C, Kings of Leon, or D, the Georgia Satellites? Okay, back to the song. Once we come back out of the chorus, we hit the C section and a change up in the lyrics. Rather than I've had my eye on you, we now have Time's Been Moving Slow, since we both got here, followed by the very seductive, come on, slide a little closer, let me whisper in your ear. In conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells author Paul Zollo that, I think I probably ad-libbed a lot of it and then refined it from there. I had the skeleton from the ad-lib, and then I took it and polished it up. And again, the charm in the lyrics in this one are that they do feel off the cuff, and not profound or weighty in any way. It's that idea, once again, of getting people up out of the emotional mud that this album cakes us in so brilliantly. As the song goes back to the beginning with the radio, we now hear Benmont Tench stabbing out the eighth notes on the piano to give the song even more of a 60s rock and roll vibe. Tom switches up the A section that we finish with by changing the lyrics in that part from, yeah, baby, let's go to the cabin down below to, baby, let's love in the cabin down below. We end on the root chord at around 2 minutes and 42 seconds, and that last note decays out to fade. Okay, so is this the most complex and musically challenging song that Tom ever wrote? Of course not. Does it have an emotional weight or a narrative clarity? No, and no, not really. Does it rock, make you want to move your feet and make you smile? Yes, yes, and yes. The economy and the simplicity of the song is what defines its almost sleazy yet fun vibe. And I don't mean sleazy in the creepy sense, more in that sort of, horny teenager kind of way. In fact, Steve Ferroni relays a brilliant anecdote that Tom told him in the Wildflowers and All the Rest liner notes, and I quote, right after Wildflowers was released, Tom, was in Tower Records on Ventura Boulevard, and this guy came up to him and said, Tom Petty, right? You know, I love your new album, but I particularly like that song about pussy. Tom laughed and said, which song is that? You know the one, it's all about pussy. Finally, Tom had to ask him, what song are you talking about? You know, Cabin Down Below. Tom couldn't stop laughing. Now, I guess that's one way to put it, and it would be hard to argue that this song isn't about getting laid. But the lyrics are written with a deliberate suggestiveness that never once strays into any type of misogyny or crudeness, which I always like when artists avoid that. One of the main reasons I never liked bands like Kiss or Motley Crue was the over-reliance on awful metaphors for, or just direct references to sex. You can write a sexy song without being crude, and I think that Tom pulls it off, no pun intended, perfectly in this sub 3-minute rocker. Today's guest conversation sees the return of my good pal and co-host on the Ultimate Catalogue Clash, Corey Morrissette. Corey used to host a brilliant podcast covering the music of Aerosmith, and as I was looking through the track and guest list, trying to pair up guests with tracks and inviting people on, I knew this one would be a perfect song for him to talk about, so I'm glad he picked it. Corey, thanks for coming back on the show, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is kind of the flagship show. One of the flagship shows for me when it comes to rock and roll podcasts. This is the one where I listen to it and I'm like, man, I wish I had just a little bit more talent. Like if I'm just a little bit better at what I do, I could maybe reach Kevin Brown level on the Tom Petty project. Because this is just one of my favorite shows.
You're so full of it. You're one of the best podcasters I know, man. It's going to be a loving, folks, because my guest this week, and I don't usually do my intros here on these ones, but is Corey Morrissette, who is the host or one of the co-hosts of And the Podcast Will Rock, podcast that's just finishing up the entire Van Halen catalog, one song to go, and also my co-host on the Ultimate Catalogue Clash, where we're talking this season about the first 20 years of Foo Fighters. So I thought tonight, Corey, what I might do is once we've kind of gone through a little bit of Wildflowers and then some chat about Cabin Down Below, which is the song we're talking about, I'll get you to do a music, lyrics, and production score in the style of UCC, and we'll see how we get on with that.
All right.
So Wildflowers. What are your feelings about Wildflowers? I know you're a pretty broad Tom Petty fan, and I think we've talked a little bit, on our various shows and offline about how much we both love Wildflowers. What is it about this record do you think that you connect with?
It's kind of everything that I love about or associate with Tom Petty on one record. It's got some early stuff, like the song we're talking about here could have been like 70s Tom Petty.
Yeah,
but it also has some, it has some beautiful stuff too. Like Wildflowers, just in itself is just a very pretty song, very very kind of. I don't know how to describe. Like Tom Petty's such a great songwriter. He could write anything, and it's all kind of encompassed on this record. You got your beautiful songs, you got some maybe darker tone songs, and you got some lighthearted songs, and two songs that are really they're just kind of rock and roll. Because you know what, at this point in the record, we need a little bit of stank. We need a little bit of
put some stank on it.
So that's when Tom breaks out the guitar and busts out the opening strains of Cabin Down Below. Just a little bit of fun.
Well, after, especially like you say, after coming after Don't Fade on Me and Hard on Me, which is a bit of a 1-2 gut punch, just emotionally. And Tom said, in the sequencing of this album, it's really important to have a little bit of levity because you can't all be dark, you can't all be, a little bit heavy on the nerves. So I think it was a good sequence. And of course, You Wreck Me sort of breaks up a little bit. Honeybee is the first one that sort of breaks the mood, and then this one comes in. So
you need those on this record because there's a lot of serious stuff on here, and there's a lot of just like really pretty stuff. Like You Belong Among the Wildflowers, like it's such a nice refrain. And for now, it was supposed to be a double album. that he had to like all of a sudden just cut 10 songs out of. Like, I'm so happy Cabin Down Below made the cut.
When it's funny when you look at those 10 songs that didn't make it, or the ones that we certainly the ones we have and ones we know about, Somewhere Under Heaven, it is one of my favorite offcuts. Leave Virginia Alone, I could see, I mean, Rod Stewart's version is like, ugh, I like Tom's version, but I can sort of see why that one doesn't fit with Wildflowers. Something Can Happen was another great one. But when you get the 15, you look at the 15, you sort of think, well, yeah, I don't think you wouldn't replace anything out of those 15, right?
You really wouldn't. And I'm thinking of a song like Hung Up and Overdue is one that I really love on those 10. Like, yeah, it's on the spot for that, right? Really nothing that you like find a song. I love that song, Crawling Down. Wasn't that one that Steve Ferroni actually had a line from Crawling Down?
Yeah, I don't think I worry about that.
Yeah. That's a cool one.
It's such a great song. I mean, that's the one. We're going to be getting to that in, I guess, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 weeks now. That's the one that I think when I think of Tom Petty and think of it, if I'm going to pick, the best song he ever wrote, that one's in the conversation, right? I mean, American Girl's got to be in that conversation. Refugee's got to be in that conversation. There's a few songs that have to be in that conversation. Crawling Back to You is certainly one of them for me.
Oh, me too. Real standout on this record for me. So, best Tom Petty songs. Like, God, that's an impossible task, isn't it? Like,
it is, yeah.
I can think of like 20 that deserve to be on that list. To pare it down to 5, I don't know if I could do it.
Well, Good to Be King. There's like 2 or 3 on. I mean, Wildflowers, really, right? There's 2 or 3 or 4 on this that you would have to put in that bracket. But I think for me, it's the consistency on Wildflowers, right? It's unusual that you get an artist puts an album out where just the quality of not just the composition, but the quality of the recording, the quality of the arrangement, and that's something that we talk about lots on Ultimate Catalogue Clash is production. About, okay, is this too long? Is this bit dragging a little bit? Is there any repetition? Could this have been better? Does it sound that kind of thing? But all those elements on Wildflowers are just A1. It's 5s across the board, pretty much.
It really is, yeah. And, Rick Rubin, you've talked a lot about him this season. You'll have some more to talk about with Rick Rubin. I was just watching the Wildflowers documentary again that was on YouTube in preparation for the show, just to listen to Rick Rubin and talk about just how much he revered Tom Petty and how much those sessions meant to him. It was really cool.
It's crazy, hey, that when you think about it, he was actually younger than Petty. I think Petty was, Tom would have been 42, I think, when they started recording. And I think Rubin was only 34 or something. So you get this young guy coming in, or certainly younger than Tom, who comes from the sort of the hip hop and background and a little bit, I think he'd done a little bit of heavy metal then. Has he done that Slayer album or something? Or he'd worked with one of the big heavy metal bands. But coming into something like this, especially not just coming to work with Tom and the Heartbreakers, but coming to work with Tom at a real emotionally fragile state where this record had to be right. This record could have taken 8, 9 years if the producer wasn't right. It could have taken him a million years to get over the line. But for some reason, that bit of chemistry between Tom and Rick really just sparked the whole thing, if you listen to, the interviews.
And they both had the same goal. That's why it's not a Heartbreakers album. They didn't want to be constrained by anything, right? They just wanted to be free to do whatever the heck they wanted. Where they could do like a super dark, somber type song, and then do a song about smoking pot, or about a boy in the corduroy pants. Like, Tom had a really vicious, great sense of humor too, right? And that's where You Wreck Me comes from, which is one of my all-time favorite songs, and that's where Cabin Down Below comes from too.
Yeah, and this was the shortest song on the album too, which always, when I remember that, I'm like, really? Clip song, it's only 2:51, so it is one of the, it's more of a sort of, it's almost like a Beatles length song, right? Where it's like, let's get out, there's no fat on this, let's just have fun with it, let's rock and roll, and then when it's time to be done, let's be done. It doesn't, because I mean, we've got 5 minutes 19 for Wake Up Time, 5:10 for It's Good to Be King, but those songs need that weight. This one, you said the word earlier, right? Stank. It's got some grease on it. There's a little bit of dirt on it,
Are you Tony Stank?
I tell my listeners, these are the little sound effects that Corey brings to our show to always make me laugh.
I am all about the stank, I tell you. Like, I used to do an Aerosmith show, and like Joe Perry and the boys, they're masters in stank. ZZ Top, they give you some good stank. I'm getting big into the Black Crowes right now, thanks to you. They're a very stank-filled band too, and it's nice that Tom can kind of get in the muck. This one almost kind of reminded me of like a John Fogerty song, just with the stank quotient dialed up to like 100.
That's a good call, Fogerty. I've never actually thought of that, but there are 2 or 3 or 4 times, I think, in Tom's catalog where you think, I could hear CCR doing this. I could hear Fogerty doing this one. This is definitely one of them.
Yeah, this is Rock and Roll Girls If you turned up the skankiness to 100.
Okay, well let's dig into it a little bit. And I know that when we go through Ultimate Catalogue Clash, you tend to be really attuned to the lyrics, and I always learn a lot from listening to your take on it. Or there's every episode at least there's one time where I'm like, man, I hadn't really thought about it that way. What's your take on these? I mean, I think we call them throwaway, but how do you read these lyrics?
This is about a guy who's trying to get laid. There's really, and cabin down below, is that a euphemism?
It's an unusual one.
Let's go to the cabin down below. I don't know. Dude's got a radio. Put it on soft and low, baby. Yeah. Let's go. Like, yeah, he's trying to get him some sugar from his little honeybee. Just a few songs later.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Wrong with that at all. So I mean, it's how the world goes round. And if it wasn't for that, none of us would be here.
Well, I thought fat bottom girls made the world go round. Was I lied to by Professor Brian May?
You were well, maybe not lied to you. Maybe just this truth was maybe stretched a wee bit. It's funny though, right? Because when you look at, like I said, we obviously this is a piece of levity or a little bit of a break from the mood of most of the rest of Wildflowers. Tom doesn't usually write this kind of song. He doesn't usually write sort of a, what you could sort of say is a throwaway lyric. But it shows that if he needs to do that, like he's got that in his locker too. He's got that in his toolkit. Well, I've had my eye on you for a long, long time. I'm watching everything you do. Baby, you're going to be mine. Again, it could be like a 60s rock and roll. Like it could be Buddy Holly. It could be Chuck Berry. It could be any of those guys, right? So it's probably leaning into that as much as anything else.
It's Del Shannon if Del was all, coked up.
Well, Tom loved Del Shannon.
That's very true. No, you don't need to read too much into these lyrics. Time's been moving slow since we both got here. Come on, slide a little closer. Let me whisper in your ear.
Yeah.
He's not looking for Girl Scout cookies.
Is that not the euphemism, Corey?
It may be. I don't know. Like your cabin down, like, oh, what is the cabin down below? Is it?
But I remember one of the things that surprised me a little bit when I watched the Finding Wildflowers, the documentary. Some of you feel free. Good Lord, I'm losing my mind. Is how often this is used, because cabin down below is kind of the theme for that documentary, more or less, because it's used repeatedly. And I think it's because it's one of those where you listen to it and you think, it's just a fun riff. We talk all the time about, meaning in music or emotion or this or that. Sometimes I really want my rock and roll to just be fun. And this one just hits me exactly in the right place for that.
When you told me, you gave me a list of songs, you gave all the better songs to the better guests, and I totally get them. But when you gave me the kind of leftover songs, and this was on the list, I'm like, oh, give me that one. Because to me, the riff is king.
Yeah.
And this song is like 80% riff. And right when it kicks in, near, I'm in, baby. Let's go to that cabin down below. I'm with you.
You get that whip crack snare from Ferroni as well, right? And then you just get that nice, and it's just a nice, easy backbeat. It's got a bit of ride going in there sometimes, but there's nothing complicated at all about this song. There's like, we love, both of us, in other artists that we listen to, space in a song. I want to be able to hear everything. I want space for everything to breathe. And again, so much space in this track.
You know what I noticed on the alternate take, on the Wildflowers and all the rest, they did an alternate take of Cabin Down Below. The drums are even bigger.
Yeah.
Like, listen to that when Steve kicks in, like big fucking booming kick drum in the snare. Like the drums actually sound better on the alternate take than they do on the album take, which is really, really good.
Yeah, I love that whole thing about Verona coming in and Hard on Me being his audition. Like that's the one that that's just criminal. That in probably 1 or 2, 3 takes, I think it was, or something. Imagine like someone coming in like that, and if you're Tom and you've been working with Stan, and that's been a challenge, and now you've got the pain of having to go through. And okay, well, it's Wildflowers, and if we have to use a few different drummers or whatever just to get through the sessions, and we'll get someone who's going to be able to play it. But when you land on Ferroni, and it's like, oh, this guy just gets it. This is the guy I've been looking for.
And they still didn't hire him right after that, right? Because they went and they did the SNL bit with Dave Grohl, offered the drum throne to him.
Yeah.
And kind of after that, thought, Steve did a pretty good job. Let's just go with him.
Steve did a pretty good job. And so Kurt Viscara comes in for the soundtrack for She's the One, but then for the tour, Wildflowers and tour, and then Steve comes back in, and then he comes back on board, and then he becomes a heartbreaker. Because I think it is just that thing of he's right there. The guy you need is right there. And I think it's that thing maybe that, with Ferroni, Jim Keltner, some of those kinds of guys, the brilliant studio musicians, but maybe you don't know what they're going to be like on the road. Maybe Maybe they don't want to go on tour. Maybe they're happier making money from doing all the session stuff. So I can sort of understand a little bit why maybe it wasn't the first thought was to, oh, let's get him into the band. But thank God they did, because I mean, he became such a mainstay of the sound from that point on.
Yeah, it's like when you bring in Howie, right? It's just like, okay, you go from one brilliant bass player to another brilliant bass player. And then when that one tragically dies, you go back to your first brilliant bass player and everything's okay.
And then, but and that you lose your harmony vocalist. Who should we bring in? I don't know, Scott Thurston from the Stooges. Yeah, well, that's good. Scott will come in,
He's got a pretty decent range. He could pretty much sing anything. So
I think that shows too, though. I've talked lots to other people about this, that there was clearly Tom, despite being, a tough taskmaster when it came to getting the songs right and make sure the music's right. It must have been pretty easy to work with, because it never seemed like he had trouble getting exactly the right guy into the band. Like you said, whether it's Howie coming in, stealing Howie from Del Shannon, whether it's bringing Steve in, whether it's bringing Ron back, or bringing Scott Thurston as first as a sort of a session player and then into the band. Like, he just had that ear for, this is the right guy, and people around the industry must thought, yeah, this guy's easy to work with. This is a good gig. Why not?
yeah, unless you're a record executive. If you remember during the Running Down a Dream documentary that Peter Bogdanovich did, and he was working with the fellow from that band. Oh, from the Byrds. He was producing his record, right? And
Roger McGuinn.
Yeah, and the record guys were trying to give him grief, and he's like, "No, don't do that. Don't listen to these idiots."
Yeah,
you're a record executive. So unless you're a record executive, Tom is really easy to work with.
No, Tom. Well, I mean, that was from the off too, right? I mean, you listen to John Scott and read his book. And he said the first time that they met John, they had a real chip on their shoulder because he was with MCA, and MCA screwed him over in their eyes. And so that mistrust of record companies or certain parts of the industry, that was built in right from the get-go, and Tom never lost that chip on his shoulder, which, thank God. I mean, it gave us Last DJ, so.
Well, even before that, right? Look at the whole kerfluffle with Hard Promises.
Yeah.
And charging too much, or even Damn the Torpedoes, that whole thing, where he was actually hiding the masters.
Yeah.
Like a kid, you drive around with this. Don't let anyone know you have the master tapes, because he's still fighting with the record company about getting his publishing back. Like,
a little bit of trivia for you. Do you know the name? Do you remember the name that they put on the tape so it wouldn't be connected to Tom?
I did, and I forgot.
Morgan Lane. Yeah. The Morgan Lane tapes. Absolutely. Yeah. Just give them to Bugs. Bugs, just go hide these. I don't want to know where you put them, because then if someone asks me, I can sort of truthfully say I don't know.
Exactly.
Crazy though, hey, that you think about artists have to stoop to those kinds of ridiculous lengths just to protect their own integrity and their own intellectual property, if you want to put it in business sense. But it's insane that the industry is so stacked against the artist that someone, like you said, he's coming off the back of 2 albums that had sort of broken him, and he's recording Damn the Torpedoes, which everyone has to know is, as soon as you hear Refugee, you think, oh, this is going to be big. So someone who's even at that stage in their career still has to go through those hoops. There's no chance for these younger artists coming through and signing away their lives. And
well, they don't even know what it is. Like Tom even said in the documentary, I thought music publishing was reprinting lyrics and songbooks. And he didn't know that he was actually signing away the rights to his songs, and he fought to get off. There's so few people, especially around that time, who knew what publishing meant. And I think a lot of people found out when Paul McCartney had his publishing bought by Michael Jackson, his friend at the time.
Yeah.
And he didn't know any of his Beatles stuff. Like a smart investment for Michael Jackson, but, pretty crappy to do to your buddy Paul McCartney.
No kidding here. I mean, especially if you're that guy, buy it and then say, hey, Paul, I bought your music back. Here you go. Like,
you don't need any more money, but it was Paul McCartney telling him, oh, you should get into publishing. Go buy some publishing, Michael. It's really good, lucrative. Yeah, it turned out he made a lot of money on that Beatles catalog, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, it's the same reason Prince changed his name to the symbol. I mean, Prince did the same thing. It was like, hang on a minute, I'm doing all the work and other people are getting paid. And it's why for the rest of his career, Prince wouldn't collaborate with people who didn't own their own publishing and distribution rights. Like he just wouldn't work with them, because he said, nope, because I have to be able to control all aspects of that, because, we talk about it is art, but the people creating it should get paid and should get paid properly. And so I never have a problem with that,
Me either. And nowadays it's even worse, because people stream all their music for the most part. You and I are old. We still buy vinyl whenever we can, but the kids today, they're listening to whatever streaming service, and artists are getting paid a percentage of a cent per stream. Like, they're making nothing. I think it was Weird Al. Spotify posted like Weird Al eclipsed, it's how many 100,000 of streams this year. And he said, "Great, I did the math. I can literally buy a sandwich with what I made."
Yeah,
from Spotify. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's insane. It's funny too, though. I was thinking about this album again, but knowing that we were going to record this. But I was watching. I know you don't care about soccer, but just there is a point to this. So it's the Copa America final tonight between Argentina and Colombia. Now, in soccer, you don't usually have a halftime show like you do at the Super Bowl, right? But this one they did, and I think it's because it's in Miami. I think it was being staged in the US, so let's make a big spectacle, all this kind of stuff. And they bring Shakira out. Now, from what I understand, I don't listen to her, Corey, but from what I understand, Shakira is a very good vocalist, very good singer. You know, I mean, I'm not into her music, but she's supposed to be a very good vocalist. Well, I'm sitting there watching it, and she's miming. So she does, I don't know, 3, 4 songs or whatever, and it was pretty dire, the music. But she's miming. It's like, I don't get what the point of that is. I don't understand why. She's got a microphone in her hand. Well, then just have her dance around on stage to her own songs. I mean, if you just want to go see Shakira dance, fine, I guess. But don't pretend she's singing. Because that's, again, like, you guys like, even, you know, let's say Jagger or Tom, of course, Springsteen, Dylan, any of these guys, they wouldn't be seen dead miming. It just wouldn't occur to them to do that for any reason at all, you know?
No, and when was it 2008? Tom did the Super Bowl because the New York Giants won the Super Bowl that year against the Patriots. They didn't mime anything, but he has the clout to go to the NFL and say, if you want me to do the halftime, I'm singing the halftime, because it's the networks, right? Like, oh, we need to have a pre-record of it in case something goes wrong or there's bad weather or what have you, or you suck. Now you can just lip sync to it, and everybody does. But, you know, I don't think Prince certainly didn't. I don't think Springsteen did when he did the Super Bowl, and I know Tom didn't.
No, and it's funny because we're both Queen fans, and famously Queen hated going on Top of the Pops, the British, you know, chart show, because it was all miming. And Rogers said, like, I hated those fucking wooden cymbals because they're wooden, obviously, because to deaden the sound. But when you watch those shows, you can tell. And it's the same thing with the Shakira. I'm sitting there watching with my daughter. I said, yeah, she's not singing. Well, you can tell the microphone's over here, then it's over here. There's no difference in the sound quality. The voice is perfect. It's like, come on. What's the point of that? I want to see a rock and roll band. I want to see a bit of stank.
Well, and now you get bands like Motley Crue, where they're miming to, like, all the bass parts are pre-recorded, and apparently all the drums are pre-recorded. I'd never heard of that before, but there's video of Tommy Lee holding his sticks in his hand over his head, and the drums are playing. And it's like, well, why even go out at this point? Like, just sit back, collect your pitiful royalties, and just call it a career, because that's just embarrassing.
I was talking to someone about, because Kiss obviously have got the Avatar thing that they're doing. I'd be surprised if, you know, I hate to say it, but I think that Queen would probably look into that, because they've got the business machine, the business empire as well. But would you ever go to see? I mean, even as a curiosity, would you go to see because basically it's just a movie, right? Really, in 3D.
You're going to watch an animated movie, so
yeah,
you got to treat it like a movie. I'm going to pay $12, and they're going to charge a hell of a lot more than $12, but I'm going to pay $12 to go watch this movie. They better have something new in it for me, like tell a story.
Yeah.
Do something. If it's just like, I saw the Kiss avatars, they're terrible. They spent tens of millions of dollars on these things, and they just look awful. And, like, who's the audience for this?
Yeah.
Because it's not diehard Kiss fans, because they've seen Kiss live. Kiss toured around the world and then some. So I've seen Kiss bloody twice in my life. I'm not even that big of a Kiss fan.
Was that both farewell tours?
No, the one wasn't a farewell tour. It was in between farewell tours. They actually had a new album out for that first tour, actually. They played one whole song off it.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah. Because that's, you know, when you go to Kiss, what you really want to hear from Paul Stanley is, this is a song off the new record.
But, yeah, I don't get the Avatar thing at all. And now Motley Crue is saying, oh, yeah, we'll totally go the Avatar route, too. And it's like, so Kiss is going to take a bath, though, because they're going to spend 50, 60, 70, $80 million on these things. And where are you going to show that you're not renting Madison Square Garden and putting up like a fake stage and a screen?
Yeah.
These things do. And it's old Kiss still singing it. Like, it's not even Kiss from the 70s when they sounded good. Yeah. It's Paul Stanley now trying to croak it out. And it's like, who the hell is going to pay $80, $90 to go watch this?
Yeah.
Even if it's Queen, I wouldn't pay that.
No, I wouldn't pay to see anyone. I mean, because leading to that's what someone said. Oh, yeah, but if it was, because you never saw Tom Petty, so you'd go if it was Petty, though, wouldn't you? I'm like, no. Oh. I would want to go see Tom Petty because it's Tom Petty and Mike Campbell and Ben Montaigne, Steve Ferroni, Scott Thurston, and Ron Blair playing their bloody instruments. That's what I want to see. You know, it's a great show. I don't care about the show. I want to see the music. You know, that's what makes the show.
I'm going to pop in my DVD of the Gatorville concert again that I think I've pretty much worn out. It came with my Running Down a Dream set, because that is a brilliant concert. I'll just watch that at home with my great system and stuff and watch Tom in the moment on that night deliver an amazing performance.
Yeah, that version of Southern accents on that show, that ranks up there as one of my favorite live performances ever, for sure.
Brings a tear to your eye. And I Won't Back Down, one of my favorite too. just the way he delivers it, right? When the whole crowd sings, you could stand me up at the gates of hell along with them. Like,
Yeah.
right, you got it.
And he's home too, right? That's what makes it so special is he's home, which Tom obviously never lost connection with it. Okay, well, listen, man. Thanks so much for doing this. It's always a blast talking music with you, but let's have a little bit of fun. And so I'll explain to my listeners now that on the Ultimate Catalogue Clash, we rate each song on a side of an album, giving a maximum of 10 points for music, maximum of 10 for lyrics, and a maximum of 5 for production. So on the spot, Corey, because I didn't bug you about this beforehand. What would you rate Cabin Down Below? What would you give it music, lyrics, and production?
I'm not going to give music a 9.5. I'm almost at a 10.
Yeah.
I think I've added like just one extra dimension to it, but that riff is so killer.
Yeah.
and the bridge section is so great. And then it gets right back into that skanky groove. I'm all over it. So 9.5 for music. I'm going to give the lyrics a 9 because I don't think Tom can write a song below an 8 from what I heard. The man's one of the best songwriters, lyric writers, I think, of all time. And even just a simple little thing like this, you know exactly what the hell he's saying. Well, I got a radio. Turn it on soft and low. Like, he's getting me wet. I'm ready, man. You know. And production, it's a 5. This whole album, I think, is a 5 pretty much for production. I couldn't think of a song that I would maybe dock it for a reason. Maybe if I actually listened to the record and kind of got into it, maybe half point here or there, but it definitely doesn't overstay its welcome.
Yeah.
It does exactly what it should do. It's sequenced perfectly. It sounds killer. I would maybe want the drums from the alternate take though, just because they had a little more oomph. But the minor nitpick. I'd give it a 9.5, a 9, and a 5, and a 10 on the Haskin scale because there is nothing wrong with Cabin Down Below at all.
Yeah, I'm exactly in the same place with you. I mean, it's one of those songs. Like I said, it's really short, it's really simple, but so is Twist and Shout, so is Louie Louie. So is Marmakin. You know, I mean, just a good rock and roll song. That's what I'm into. That's what gets me off, Corey, you know?
I don't believe the best song of all time, as everyone knows, is Surfin' Bird. Very simple song there, too. So,
what is that now?
Oh, we're doing the Trashmen Season 4 Ultimate Catalog Clash. You haven't heard Surfin' Bird? Oh, you have not been in Canada long. Surfin' Bird, come on, man. I got to play it for you now.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. The bird. The bird's a winner when a bird. Bird is a winner when a bird.
Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. A fairly short episode this week because, well, A, Cabin Down Below is a pretty short song, and B, there isn't a ton of musical depth or complexity, or certainly not lyrical complexity for me to really pick apart. And that's entirely intentional with this song. As Tom tells Paul Zollo, it was another one that I saw as a relief in the sequence of things. That it would be a moment of semi-nonsense for a minute. Okay, we're going to party for a minute here. And as always, Tom and the Heartbreakers get the job done. I love this fun, straight-ahead little groove rocker, and I'm more than happy to give it a rock-solid 8 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out on Twitter at Deep Dive Podnet. Check out my other podcast, the Seaside Pod Review, which is a Queen podcast. And check out the Ultimate Catalogue Clash that I co-host with today's guest, Corey Morrissette. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at the Tom Petty Project, and on Twitter at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe, do all those things, and do leave a comment if you have a couple of minutes. Just write a comment. Leave me a 5-star review and leave a comment. It makes a difference. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out your comments on the show. As a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. When you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms or go to your local independent record seller to grab some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, please go to tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And check out Tom Petty Radio, which is channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the 11th track from Wildflowers, The Beautiful to Find a Friend. Bye-bye.